With George Stephanopoulos starts right now.
100 days to Election Day.
We are certainly not at the end of the game.
The coronavirus still raging.
Record-breaking number of people testing positive.
Clashes over federal forces dispatched to Democratic cities.
What we have seen is a significant increase in violent crime.
We do not welcome dictatorship. We do not welcome authoritarianism.
And sinking in the polls, President Trump backtracks, canceling his convention in Jacksonville.
He's quit on you, and he's quit on this country.
We have to be careful, and we also have to set an example.
White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows joins us this week for his first Sunday interview. New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham responds for the Democrats, plus points behind in all the key battleground states with 100 days before the final votes are cast. Which means our first guest has his work cut out for him. We want to welcome Mark Meadows for his first Sunday interview as White House Chief of Staff. Mr. Meadows, thank you for joining us this morning. You just heard that narrative right there. What's your strategy to turn this around?
Well, I think we have to focus, obviously, on trying to make sure that there's therapeutics, vaccines, a number of mitigation therapies, hopefully, for those that are suffering from the coronavirus. I can tell you that we've been working around the clock. The president has been very clear. Whatever amount of money, whatever amount of time needs to be invested, we're doing that. We're hopeful that with some of the breakthrough technology on therapeutics that we'll be able to announce some new therapies in the coming days. This is a virus that came from China, something that's unexpected. Obviously, when you're in the political world, there are those things that you can control. There are those things that you can't. And as we look at this, it's trying to make sure that we've got our entire team there to provide the relief that so many Americans are looking for, and the hope that so many Americans are looking for. And I'm hopeful that in the next couple of days that we'll have some very good news on the therapeutic and vaccine fronts as we try to address this China virus.
We all hope for that. You say there are some things you can't control, that this came from China, but do you acknowledge that had the president promoted masks earlier, had the country moved towards shutting down the economy, at least in parts earlier, we could have done a better job controlling this virus?
Well, we did shut down the economy, George. You mentioned that. We actually took unprecedented steps. Not only did the president shut down travel from China and Europe long before even the medical experts were suggesting he should do so, then we shut down the economy to try to mitigate the damage. You know, as you mentioned, masks, obviously we all want to do whatever we can do to stop this, and wearing masks when there's not the ability to social distance is one additional thing that we can do. But even in those areas, you know, if you take southern Florida, Miami-Dade, Broward County, they've had mandatory mask provisions for several weeks, and yet they continue to see this virus escalate. And so we're not going to have a solution to this. It's not masks. It's not shutting down the economy. Hopefully, it is American ingenuity that will allow for therapies and vaccines to ultimately conquer this, and that's where the president has made sure that there's no amount of money that is held back for meeting those needs.
Big concerns about testing as well. It has improved since the early days. There's no question about that. But experts agree we need more comprehensive and quickly process testing. Your predecessor as Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, wrote this week that the testing problem we face is, quote, simply inexcusable at this point in the pandemic. What's the plan to fix it?
Well, I mean, we're testing over 1 million people a day. I can tell you that when you come up with additional testing, obviously in some of those critical areas like nursing homes and long-term care, our schools, healthcare providers, and indeed child care, if we can provide those point of consumption and point of tests where literally we're looking at when somebody comes in, they can get a very quick test there. That may help, but when we look at the regime that we've got, we're testing more than any other country in the world. And as we look at the testing environment, here's what we have to understand is so much of this is asymptomatic. Other countries, all they do is test when you come to the hospital. We're finding more cases because we're testing more, but indeed what we need to do is make sure that we focus on those nursing homes, long-term care, so that we can bring that death count down, because those are the ones that are most at risk when we look at those that are elderly or with comorbidities.
Extended unemployment benefits are expiring this week for 25 million Americans, but the Republican Party still has not landed on a proposal to counter the Democrats. Where do things stand on that right now? And will those $600 in additional unemployment benefits be extended?
Well, the original benefits will not. We actually, the original unemployment benefits actually paid people to stay home, and actually a lot of people got more money staying at home than they would going back to work. And so the president's been very clear. Our Republican senators have been very clear. We're not going to extend that provision. We are going to be prepared on Monday to provide unemployment insurance extension that would be 70% of whatever the wages you were prior to being unemployed, that it would reimburse you for up to 70% of those wages, hopefully as a way to get people back on their feet. We're prepared to do that.
Can I stop you right there, sir? Because state unemployment administrators have said that that's going to be almost impossible to administer, and people are going to face real gaps before they get money.
Well, we've actually looked at that. I've actually been on the phone with Secretary Scalia, Secretary of Treasury Stephen Mnuchin. We believe that in a combination of working with Secretary Mnuchin and Secretary Scalia, we'll be able to find a way to actually provide a threshold that will meet that guideline. Yes, some of the state benefit computer systems are antiquated, and so we're going to have to work from a federal government standpoint. Secretary Mnuchin is willing to step in and help with that. It's our goal to make sure that it's not antiquated computers that keep people from getting their benefits. But as we look at trying to make sure that we get this economy back going again, and actually the president's done an outstanding job there. We had an estimated 40 million people that were going to be unemployed. It never got even close to that number. We're still well beyond where we would hope a healthy economy would be, but it's improving very quickly. And so the Secretary and I have been on Capitol Hill, as you know, over the weekend. We'll be back there again today, putting the final touches on a bill that Leader McConnell plans to introduce tomorrow. But honestly, I see us being able to provide unemployment insurance, maybe a retention credit to keep people from being displaced or brought back into the workplace, helping with our schools. If we can do that along with liability protection, perhaps we put that forward, get that passed as we can negotiate on the rest of the bill in the weeks to come.
I want to look ahead to the election. The president continues to warn that it's going to be rigged, that's his word, by mail-in ballots, even though there's no compelling evidence that mail-in ballots are tied to widespread voter fraud. Here he was with Chris Wallace.
I think mail-in voting is going to rig the election. I really do.
Are you suggesting that you might not accept the results of the election?
I have to see. Look.
Can you give a direct answer? You will accept the election?
I have to see. Look, I have to see.
Why does the president keep questioning the election, and why won't he say clearly, as every president has done before, that he'll accept the results?
Well, George, you talked earlier about no compelling evidence of any voter fraud as it relates to mail-in ballots. I would have to disagree with that.
I said widespread voter fraud.
Okay, widespread. Well, here's the thing is we haven't had widespread mail-in ballots. The Democrats see this as their panacea of being able to put a ballot in every mailbox and hope for the best. Listen, that's not the way that the voter integrity process needs to run, where you send a ballot to everybody. Absentee ballots, the request for absentee ballots is certainly something that's happened in a number of states, is certainly something the president supports. But as we look at that, we want to make sure that every vote counts, but that it's only one vote per person. You can't have ballot harvesting. We've seen ballot harvesting schemes in California, and I'm not suggesting that that there is widespread fraud there, but there certainly is fraud. There certainly is fraud. And so for us, to be intellectually honest, we need to make sure that we have that. Yeah.
Let me press you on that, because it's not just Democrats raising the questions. Tom Ridge, former Republican governor of New Jersey, former Homeland Security Secretary under President Bush, George W. Bush, has said there's no history of widespread voter fraud, and he wonders, when you listen to the president, you begin to wonder, is he worried about the legitimacy of the electoral process, or is he worried about losing? Your response to Governor
yeah, to my knowledge, Tom hadn't been involved in any voter integrity project since perhaps he left over a decade ago. And so I don't know that that's an informed decision as much as it is an opinion. And everybody can come on TV and provide their opinion. What we do know is a number of times as we have mail-in ballots, if there is not a chain of custody that goes from the voter to the ballot box, mischief can happen. And we've seen that throughout our history. We also see very clearly that if you're going to cast a ballot, you want to make sure it goes in the ballot box and it's your vote that counts, not your vote for someone else that gets decided by another person.
The intelligence community also put out a stark warning this week about possible foreign interference in our election, Iran, China, and Russia. Did the president bring this up with Vladimir Putin in his last phone call, and what is he doing to prevent it?
Well, he's doing a great deal to prevent it. You know, as we saw the previous administration, they talked about election interference and did very little to address it, George. Not only have we seen hundreds of millions of dollars that have been invested, but 2 different legislative actions that this president has signed off on to make sure that election integrity is important. We've got not only the Department of Homeland Security, but the Intel community, the Department of Justice, a number of others trying to make sure that what we do is again, that foreign interference in our elections does not happen. Now, there's a big difference between foreign interference and foreign influence. They continue to try to influence, as everyone does across the globe. But in terms of actually affecting the vote totals and interacting, I think we're in a good place. We've been willing to work with the secretaries of states of all 50 states as we look at that, and the territories, to make sure that their systems have the needed resources for the integrity to be there, and so that we can count on that.
We're seeing continuing unrest in Portland and Seattle, riots overnight, where federal agents have been sent to protect federal monuments, in Portland, that is. And the Justice Department announced this week that it'll be sending federal agents to deal with violent crime in many cities across the country, including Albuquerque. The New Mexico governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, is up next. She's threatened to sue and invited the administration to work together first. Will you take her up on that offer?
Well, we certainly want to work with the governor, not only of New Mexico, but of the other 3 states. There's 2 different things, so I want to separate those for a moment. In Portland, we have federal agents there that are protecting a courthouse that actually has not only been vandalized, but they're trying to burn it down, George. And in Kansas and other areas, because what we're trying to do there is come in and help with gang violence and making sure that we make arrests. We've already done so outside of Chicago, and so Operation Legend is really designed to make sure that those moms and dads who have lost loved ones, who have lost kids and grandkids, and perhaps kids that have lost their parents because of gang violence in these cities, that we come in a very covert way to investigate and work alongside local law enforcement. Attorney General Barr has been willing to do that, is doing that now, and certainly working with the governor in that fashion is what we would love to do.
Mr. Meadows, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, George.
As I said, the New Mexico governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, is up next. We'll be right back.
We will also soon send federal law enforcement to other cities that need help. One of them is Albuquerque, New Mexico, where last fall 55-year-old Jackie Vigil was murdered as she was getting into her car.
You almost know that something is up because, one, the president's talking about Albuquerque, which doesn't usually happen. That voice was explicitly articulating a sort of gaslighting strategy against immigrants and people of color and protesters in progressive Democrat cities.
Federal agents will be on their way to Albuquerque, and we're joined now by the New Mexico governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham. Governor, thank you for joining us this morning.
You're welcome, George. Nice to see you.
You know, we just heard from Mark Meadows, the White House chief of staff, who talked about Operation Legend, said he sounded like he was willing to take you up on your offer to work together to fight crime, distinguish the program of sending Operation Legend from what's going on in Portland right now. Are you prepared to sit down with him, and will you withdraw any threats to sue the federal government?
Well, the issue about making sure that New Mexicans, that their civil rights are protected is forefront for everything that we do every day. So that stands less of a litigation threat, but a re-recognition that we are going to put New Mexicans first. I've already spoken with the U.S. Attorney assigned Mr. Anderson and made it really clear that if we've got 35 agents, they will be COVID safe, they will quarantine, they will integrate into the operations that we already have. He certainly gave me every indication that he's willing to do that. The interesting thing here is that we've asked for federal agents to cooperate with us on any number of strategies. They have not provided the federal funding that was promised to Albuquerque for police and crime interventions. And earlier in this administration, they closed down Border Patrol checkpoints, and we had to cover those with state police. So the timing of their efforts remains to be a bit suspect. But to your question, if we are cooperatively working to address violent crime and gun violence, absolutely. If we're going to try to incentivize unrest, then that's something altogether different.
It comes at a time when the Trump campaign is running a series of ads, including in New Mexico, about the issue of crime. Let's take a look.
You have reached the 911 police emergency line. Due to defunding of the police department, we're sorry, but no one is here to take your call. Leave your name and number, and someone will get back to you. Our estimated wait time is currently 5 days. Goodbye.
Says Joe Biden supporters are fighting to defund police. You won't be safe in Joe Biden's America. Your response?
Outrageous. It's really terrible that we're going to have an election 100 days out instead of talking about what people really want us to address, right? They want to know what we're going to do about public health and healthcare. They want to know about economic security. They want to talk about how we unify this country. And instead, if you're looking at defunding police, again, Albuquerque is missing, I think, about $9.6 million from the Trump administration as a direct investment in both police investments so that we've got enough officers doing the right preventative work on the streets, and simultaneously, we're doing a ton of good, productive, proactive race relations work. So it is really about stoking fear. It isn't about, and there isn't anything else you can point to 100 days out where you've succeeded. The economy is in turmoil and in trouble. We can't do public health. We are in real crisis in terms of combating COVID-19. We are seeing a failure in leadership. So let's go to making people fearful. So it's disappointing, but frankly expected.
I do want to talk about that COVID crisis. I want to put up a chart right now showing what's happening in New Mexico. Your cases have been on the rise, a real spike right there. You had the highest cases of the year on Thursday. Hospitalizations and deaths are going up as well. I know you put a pause on reopening earlier this month, but is it time to do more?
We are very serious here. You can see that New Mexico for weeks was in the green in terms of being ready to reopen following CDC guidelines. One of the first states clearly to do a shutdown, to cancel schools, to mandate masks. But here's the problem. And you're right, we're seeing record high daily averages. We are actually seeing a reduction in hospitalizations, but our death count is still way too high. And these mortality issues, these are people's loved ones, right? Every single time I have to announce that we've lost someone in New Mexico, it is the most painful experience. We flattened the curve again in New Mexico, but the case count is way too high. And while we have one of the lowest positivity rates in the country, which we work diligently at having, what's going on around the country affects everyone in the country. We are moving and traveling. I've got commuters and workers and federal employees and bases. My goodness, in fact, in our corrections issues, it's been the movement of ICE detainees without testing them, without following New Mexico's COVID safe practices that brought COVID in to our corrections facilities. So we are at the mercy of what's going on around the country. No national strategy, no public health investment. It's a hoax that we're not going to invest. Wait way too long before you talk about either pausing, suspending. You've got the president now. We're not going to have a convention. That's not safe. But we want everyone to reopen schools immediately. Makes no sense whatsoever.
Yep.
There is no national strategy. I still spend most of my days chasing testing supplies for our state. It is the worst abdication of a national response and responsibility to protect Americans I've ever seen in my government career.
You also heard Mr. Meadows raising those concerns about mail-in voting, echoing the president as well. New Mexico has widespread mail-in voting. You don't have to give an excuse to get an absentee ballot. What are you doing to troubleshoot any potential problems with ballot security looking ahead to November?
You know, we are a Secretary of State, an incredibly professional, one of the well-known nationally, has been working on election security, including foreign interference. Secretary of State Maggie Toulouse-Oliver has built her entire career from being a county clerk to the Secretary of State at the checks and balances for all voting systems, including our mail-in ballots. We've made some minor adjustments in a special session, really getting at that when you sign those inner and outer ballots, that the chain of custody is very clear and very secure. It's the same kind of effort that we see in productive mail-in voting in other states, and we feel very confident here. I mean, your point earlier, the bigger issue is what are we doing about hacking systems, about the fact that we still have far too many jurisdictions that don't have a paper ballot, and that we have foreign election interference. If you really were worried about voter integrity and election integrity, these would be the areas that we would be focused on. Here, it seems to me like this is a false diversion because we're looking at voter suppression, not voter safeguards. Those are very different issues, and New Mexico feels incredibly confident about its current effort, and it will also prevent, to a much higher degree, the spread of COVID, which is foremost in our minds.
You've been mentioned as a possible running mate for Joe Biden. Have you been vetted by his team? Are you prepared to serve?
I will do whatever I can to improve any number of issues in this country and in our state. I'm lucky to be the governor of the best state in the United States, and I am flattered beyond measure that the Biden campaign understands that governing and governors are, I think, an important vehicle to look at how we make improvements in the country. I've only been in touch with the campaign, and while it's incredibly flattering, I've got a full-time job right here, right now.
Governor, thanks for your time this morning.
You're very welcome. Thank you, George.
Nate Silver and a roundtable coming up. Stay with us.